Okay, here we go. First of all, to understand this video, you'll need to have seen my first video, I'm Worried About She-Ra, where I talk about how I was worried that the show would go on to redeem or forgive Catra, Shadow Weaver, and Hordak, and why I thought that was a bad plan. But yeah, please check out that video before you watch this one so you aren't confused about why I don't care that Horde Prime wasn't redeemed and stuff. Second of all, I am going to say some critical things about the way this show handled its abuse narrative, but that doesn't change my overall love and appreciation for the series. Not only do I love She-Ra's characters, humor, and positive messages about love and friendship, but queer creators like me will have more opportunities because She-Ra pulled off this much rep. All those LGBT characters on screen made me feel so seen and loved and so optimistic about the future. But I feel like I'm allowed to critique the show's abuse narrative since abuse was one of She-Ra's main themes. I can only hope that I've managed to do so with respect. She-Ra did not make this easy for me. If you go to the latest comments on my first She-Ra video, half of them will be like, "Oh, you must have loved the last season, they didn't do what you were worried about." And the other half of comments are like, "Oh, I guess you won't like this last season, they did exactly what you were worried about." For the most part, She-Ra has been pretty comfortable telling us when or whether the characters have forgiven each other. We're told that everyone opens up to and accepts Catra when she's made the choice to get better. We're told that everyone forgives Entrapta after she's endangered them over and over. We're told that maybe Bo will take a while to forgive Glimmer completely, but they still love each other. So there's an understandable amount of confusion surrounding Shadow Weaver and Hordak, who break the pattern of definitive answers. The show does not tell us how everyone feels about Hordak after She-Ra banishes Horde Prime. He gets a hug from Entrapta and this one comment from Mermista.
So are we all just like, okay with this?
And that's all. The show does not tell us whether Catra and Adora's opinion of Shadow Weaver changes after she dies to save them. She-Ra leaves the audience to decide whether or not these characters were redeemed, and as I've watched people react to this season, I've come to realize that redemption as a concept is extremely subjective. Really, the word redemption just means to be saved from sin or to clear a debt. Some people believe a character has to face and repay all the people they've hurt to be redeemed. Some people believe they just have to do one good, heroic act. So let's look at Hordak first. He did barely anything to atone for the horrible war crimes he committed. He rose up against Horde Prime to assert his selfhood and failed to kill him. So why should we believe he's been redeemed? Like, yes, he was brainwashed, but that explains his behavior without excusing it. When Hordak was cut off from Horde Prime in the Pocket Dimension, he was acting on his own free will. He still presumably ordered the deaths of at least hundreds of people. Yet a lot of people still watched the scene and thought Hordak had been redeemed, and I think that's fair, honestly. Because She-Ra has set up this precedent for itself where everybody who's ever endangered the rebels, with the exception of Shadow Weaver, who we'll get to, has been accepted and given a second chance by our heroes. Even characters like Entrapta, Scorpia, and Catra, who actively worked to kill the main characters for seasons. If Catra can be accepted by the Best Friend Squad, even after she sent troops out to wipe out whole villages, nearly destroyed reality, like Baby sort of killed Quiver's mom, then why wouldn't everyone accept Hordak too? By the end of Season 4, he and Catra very nearly had the same job. If a person thinks of redemption as everyone forgives and accepts this character, then I wouldn't fault them for assuming the show had redeemed Hordak. We don't see that on screen, no, but we also don't see him get rejected by the rest of the cast. It makes sense to fall back on precedent. And that kind of brings up the question of, is it a good thing that Hordak's redemptive status is left up to the audience to decide? On one hand, I'm all for shows leaving their audience with complex questions. I feel like the best stories do that. You don't want to spoon-feed your audience the answers all the time. On the other hand, that can sometimes feel less of like the creators asking the audience to think critically about a scenario, and more like the creators asking the audience to write the script for them. This strikes me as more of the latter option. You can assume everyone became friends with Hordak after the show ends. You can assume nobody but Entrapta becomes friends with Hordak after the show ends. You can assume he was held accountable for his actions or not, and you would be right either way, because that's not the show. That's fan fiction. I feel like a middle ground exists here. Hordak didn't have to be flat out redeemed or not redeemed. I'm sorry, but I gotta do this. I have to play this clip from the Penumbra podcast, okay? I'm sorry.
You should not die, Intendida.
Why not? After everything I've done, why not? That day we've been talking about, we killed 15 people, Jet. But if I'd finished it and sent it to the front, that bomb would have killed hundreds. My weapons have killed so many people. There is no forgiveness after that.
You are correct. We will never be forgiven. But that is not a reason to die. Not when other good can still be done. The past is dead behind us. The future is potential.
My battery.
You will build another, or teach someone else to, or do something else that is good. It will not be better than the suffering we've caused, but it will be good, and that must be enough.
Now that's a concept that maybe you won't ever be forgiven or redeemed, but you're still capable of doing good for yourself and others. Another example of a more complicated middle ground, I feel like She-Ra did a great job with Glimmer's apology to Bow. There's a concrete answer here where we know where these two characters stand, but there's also some ambiguity because Bow doesn't straight up forgive or not forgive Glimmer for her actions. Rather, Glimmer acknowledges the weight of her mistakes and tells Bow that she's going to do better and that she doesn't expect him to ever forgive her. And Bow doesn't coddle her. He just says, okay. It's a really beautiful, honest moment that shows these creators are capable of some really mature takes on forgiveness. It's great that they trust kids enough to get that lesson that sometimes when you fuck up, people can take a long time to forgive you and still love you. I understand that Noelle and the others were undoubtedly under pressure from the studio to keep things simple. I don't know what they were and weren't allowed to do. But if Hordak had asked, "Do you think they'll ever forgive me for what I've done?" and Entrapta said she didn't know, and Hordak resolved to become a better person anyway, I think that would have made me a lot less uncomfortable than the final product, where the only nod we got to the horrible war Hordak put everyone through was this.
So are we all just okay with this?
We don't see Hordak get held accountable for any of the awful things he's done. As long as the show leaves Hordak's redemption status up to the audience, a bunch of viewers are going to assume he was straight up redeemed or straight up not redeemed, when we could have had a more nuanced take like the one with Bow and Glimmer or the one from the Penumbra podcast. A resolution that doesn't absolve Hordak of responsibility for his actions, but also doesn't condemn him to eternal misery. Okay, you guys might not believe me here, but my friend Haley called me a couple weeks before the final season dropped and she was like, "Rab, somehow I'm still mad about Voltron." And I, as someone who has of course moved on from Voltron, was shocked and appalled. But yeah, she was like, "I'm so pissed at how they treated General Sanda. She didn't deserve to die a hero's death." And I was like, yeah, I'm actually super worried about She-Ra right now because I feel like they're gonna do the same thing to Shadow Weaver. Okay then, now let's back up. It took me a while, but once I had sat with this scene for a week, I realized I really liked how complicated Shadow Weaver's death was. Relationships between grown-up kids and their abusive parents are complicated. You can both love and hate an abusive person. Someone can hurt you for years and years, and you can still cry when they die. I like that Shadow Weaver decides Catra and Adora and Etheria are more valuable to her than power. I like that she decides to take her mask off and bear the scars she got from Mysticor, to die not as the all-powerful entity she wanted people to see her as, but as her true, deeply flawed self. That read like an acceptance of her failures to me. Also, whereas Catra's one good thing was the first step on a long road to recovery, Shadow Weaver's was the end of the road. It makes her sacrifice both selfish and selfless, that while Shadow Weaver saves Catra and Adora, at the same time she relieves herself of the long, difficult task of becoming a better person. I love that concept of this really messy final moment that's both painfully honest after endless years of lies and manipulation, and also still a bit selfish and snide.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I'm a terrible person.
On the other hand, you'll notice that when these characters learn a lesson, they usually say that lesson out loud. Glimmer says she's learned to trust her mom, and Adora says she's learned not to be alone like 20 goddamn times. I'm haunted by the question, should the show have made someone say Shadow Weaver hadn't been completely redeemed or forgiven? Like, I don't want to say kids are dumb, because they're not. But adults were confused about what this scene meant for Shadow Weaver, Adora, and Catra. As far as I can tell, people were pretty split on what the story wanted to say about Shadow Weaver until Noelle came forward a couple days after the season aired to say, no, Shadow Weaver wasn't redeemed. Because the actual show doesn't make clear whether a mass murderer like Hordak was redeemed after his one good thing, yeah, I wouldn't fault anyone who guessed Shadow Weaver could have been as well. Ren on Twitter pointed out that almost everybody believes Darth Vader was redeemed, even though he helped kill millions of people and, like Shadow Weaver, only performed his one good thing seconds before he died. Sure, also like Shadow Weaver, Darth Vader saved the universe and protected his kid, but that doesn't change the lives he ruined. For a lot of kids, hell, a lot of adults, to understand that Shadow Weaver's final moments were not supposed to redeem her or reveal her secret good nature or suggest that Adora and Catra had forgiven her, you'd need someone to say as much. It's that tightrope walk again between spoon-feeding the audience and making the audience write the script for you. You probably don't want a big chunk of your audience to believe you've redeemed this character, no, but you don't want to straight up tell your audience what to think or how to feel either. As for me, I'm not sure. I'm tempted to say it's complicated. Maybe that's okay. But on to Catra. Out of all the people who got redeemed, or maybe, I don't know, you decide redeemed, I'm the happiest with the way this show handles Catra's redemption. Here's what I liked. I liked that they gave Catra's arc a lot of elbow room. Her redemption does not happen within one episode, or 2, or 3. We see her slowly become a better, healthier person over the course of the entire season. Also, my friend Sander pointed out to me that Catra's redemption is almost entirely self-driven. In the past, Adora has tried to force Catra to become a better person, but eventually she had to accept that she couldn't make Catra's choices for her. Catra had to be the one to decide to get better.
You made your choice. I'll live with it!
And this season, she does. Catra decides to save Glimmer. When Adora says she can leave, Catra decides to stay. Yes, Adora and the others reprimand Catra when she slips up, but Catra's the one who reaches out for help and corrects herself. She holds herself to a higher standard. We never see anyone tell Catra that she has an anger problem, but she still recognizes that within herself and works to get better.
I'm sorry, I got angry. It's something I'm working on.
Oh, you are?
Yes! Now can you please? Yes, I am.
Also unprompted, we see her make an effort to be more open and honest about how she's feeling.
Ready to be home?
Not really. Okay, fine. Maybe.
We see Shadow Weaver and Hordak make one good choice, while Catra makes the choice to get better over and over and over again. She doesn't argue when someone points out she's hurt people. She just quietly continues to work on herself. It makes her happy ending feel earned to me. Also, I hadn't really considered something big when I made my first She-Ra video, and that's the fact that a lot of people relate to Catra. Like, really relate to Catra. Hell, I had a commenter in my last video who said they were afraid that, like Catra, they damaged their relationships beyond repair, and they were destined to be alone forever. There are real abused people out there who are afraid to get close to people and who lash out at their friends out of fear and who don't feel like they belong anywhere and are starved for love and acceptance. I'm sure a lot of those people found this season to be very healing, maybe even inspiring. Catra's arc is essentially telling viewers that they can take charge of their lives and their recovery and find their happiness. For that reason, I wouldn't want Catra to have a bad ending. God, no. But here's what I don't like. That Catra was forgiven by everybody. I think there's something to be said for the fantastical escapism of all your friends will forgive you once you commit to becoming a better person, but I feel like that narrative almost propagates the idea you'll never be happy or redeemed until you make up with all the people you've hurt. And I think that's a very dangerous thing to believe. If anyone needs to hear this right now, sometimes people will not forgive you for the way you treated them. Sometimes they will not want to be friends with you anymore. That does not mean you are a lost cause. That does not mean you deserve to be miserable forever. You can still become a healthier, happier person. You can still find new friends who love you. It's really, really hard when you can't be friends with someone you love, but other people's decisions do not reflect your capacity for change. And this show could have shown that if one person hadn't forgiven Catra. If one solitary person hadn't made up with Catra by the end of the story, I wouldn't have a problem here, but because everyone does forgive Catra, she never has to face that difficult reality. Even someone like Perfuma, who berates Catra for the way she treated Scorpia, befriends her by the end. Glimmer never even mentions the fact that Catra kind of killed her mom. Baby. It's almost like the show has to resolve everything with friendship because that's what the show's about. And also it's a kid show. Oh no! It's like Adora forgave and befriended Catra. Fine, I'll talk about that later. But Scorpia? I wish she'd been the one person who hadn't. We see Catra attack Adora on the regular, and we know a big part of why Catra did such horrible things was to get back at Adora. But for most of the show, Catra and Adora are separated. Scorpia and Catra, meanwhile, live together. We get to see the gritty details of their relationship unfold up close. We see Scorpia take Catra's abuse over and over and over without complaint. It's not very subtle. This feels like an abusive relationship.
You never know when to shut up. The only thing you've ever done is get in my way. What did I expect? I mean, how can you possibly be this useless?
Yes, Scorpia probably heard that Catra teamed up with the rebellion and helped save the world, but God, this reunion undermines Scorpia's goodbye for me. I get the sense that we're supposed to come away from this scene with a message, oh, Scorpia left Catra because she's a bad friend. Once Catra becomes a good friend, Scorpia can come back to her. But unfortunately, at least for me, this scene ties Scorpia's decision to put herself first to her decision to leave Catra. That's the moment that kickstarts Scorpia's road to self-love. So even though I know Catra will treat Scorpia with respect now that she's grown as a person, my lizard brain still sees Scorpia return to Catra and thinks that growth has been reversed. From what I've seen, a lot of fans have had the same gut reaction. It feels uncomfortable to watch Scorpia take Catra back so easily after so much of her recovery was a direct result of their breakup. Catra's recovery doesn't erase what she did to make Scorpia leave. I've heard people say, of course Scorpia would take Catra back. She's so kind. But I can't help but feel like a better message would have been, Scorpia's kind, but that doesn't mean she has to come back to Catra right away. Let Scorpia show the audience that they're allowed to not go back to someone who hurt them, and that doesn't make them any less kind as a person. Also, the message of the goodbye scene, where Scorpia's solution to an abusive situation was to walk away and find better friends, feels much more applicable to a real-life abusive relationship to me than the reunion scene, which says you can take back abusive friends or partners once they've proven themselves worthy of another chance. How can real-life people know when a former abuser or bad friend has really changed? How can they know they're safe to return to? That's a really hard distinction to make. It's another situation where real-life logic and cartoon logic clash. And I know a less black and white reunion would have been a hard ask because we don't want to end the show on a downer note. For Scorpia to tell Catra she still needed some time, and for Catra to accept that, you'd end with a bittersweet scene at best. The kids would probably be much happier to watch these two embrace and be friends again, no questions asked. And at the end of the day, the show's for them, not adults like me. So I get why the creators did what they did. They were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. At least Catra did mostly apologize.
Look, about everything that happened. I'm really...
So let's talk about Adora. Adora's also complicated. Everybody's complicated. I gotta go lie down. So I'm pretty sure She-Ra wants me to believe that you should only accept people who've hurt you back into your life after they've made the choice to change. And that's okay, I guess. I'd still argue that that can be a dangerous thing to do, but fine. Unfortunately, sometimes that message feels less like wait until your friend has worked on themselves before you give them another chance, and more like you should never give up on your friends no matter how many times or how badly they hurt you. And that last moral clashes horribly with the show's abuse narrative. Like, okay, let Adora forgive Catra. I do find this a bit uncomfortable because without that one example of non-forgiveness, that less great moral becomes more valid. I'm a lot less uncomfortable with Catra and Adora than Catra and Scorpia, though, because we do see Adora hold Catra accountable. She doesn't let Catra get away with her old behavior. Adora's never positioned as Catra's therapist. She helps her, but like I said, ultimately Catra saves herself. If Catra wasn't committed to that path, Adora was ready to let her run off to some random planet, which takes some of the wind out of the sails of never give up on or leave your friends ever. That's all good stuff to show younger kids. We're like, yeah, you can help someone so long as they want to be helped, but that doesn't mean you have to become their savior or their doormat. At the end of the day, I'd say that the pros of two main characters kissing at the climax of your entire series outweigh the potential cons of this relationship. You can't deny that this love story is going to open up even more doors to queer creators. This will be another moment we can all show to companies and say, hey, here's proof that people love queer rep. This could be a profitable business decision. It's absolutely something to celebrate. If you don't like this LGBT relationship, then now I can promise you there'll be more to come. So, did She-Ra do what I was worried about? Kind of. It depends on how you view redemption. Was the show's abuse narrative successful? I'd say sometimes. You can't hit a home run every time. She-Ra's still a super fun, hopeful, wonderful show. Because there was no contention anywhere, like I was worried about, this finale was like a freight train of serotonin to my brain. I'm sad that we didn't get to see some of these more nuanced takes on redemption, yeah, but maybe another kid's show will pick up where She-Ra left off and, show people that you don't have to be forgiven and make friends with everyone to be a good person. Until then, we can celebrate the two main girls kissed! Oh my fucking god, I was so happy I was wrong! I was so sure this wouldn't happen, and then it did, and I had to pace my house so many times, I made a rut in the floor, and then I called my friend, and I was so righteously I ripped a tree out of the ground with my bare hands! A frankly enormous thank you to all my patrons who help make these videos possible. Y'all give me life. If you aren't already a patron and you would also like to see your name on this screen, you can pledge to me on Patreon to get listed, see videos early. Also, on my Q&A video, I mentioned that my friends and I called ourselves the Sin Squad for a while, and we maybe wanted to make a YouTube channel, but I turned out to be the only person to post content on here, so who's the squad now? And then people were like, what if the viewers were the Sin Squad? And I fucking love that so much! So, thanks for being part of the squad, I guess. See ya, sinners!